My name is Ruby Lois Bean. I was born in East Hampton in 1934, the youngest of 6 children. My parents were Kenneth Burt and Florence Sauls. My dad was a farmer all his life. He had about 300 cows. We raised chickens, and for a while we raised tobacco. I was about 7 years old when I became very involved in 4-H clubs because my sisters were belonging to 4-H, and I thought it was neat to learn how to sew on a machine. We used to have an old Singer, and I learned to sew on that machine, and I became very interested in making clothes, and I did canning and foods projects. I exhibited a lot of the things that I did at the 3-County Fair and also all 4-H events. Then I became very involved in the older programs of teenagers getting together and learning new ideas and also having a good time relating to other people that lived in my county. In 1954, I applied for the 4-H exchange program. This was an exchange program that was about 4 years old, and I had listened to some of the young people who had gone on this program. Some of them were my friends, and they just enjoyed it. They said, "You got to go." I had seen how much fun they had, many of the activities that they did, and the people that they saw from other countries. I wanted to go because I was just at the age where I really wanted to explore the world a little bit. That was the one thing I wanted to do in my youth. We talked a lot about it at home with my parents, and I decided I would definitely do the application. And it was quite a lengthy questionnaire. You had to really show that you were interested in learning more about 4-H and about people in other countries. Lo and behold, in December, I found out that I had been selected, but they were still waiting, not knowing where they were going to send me. My mother thought I should be going to France. Somebody else thought I should go to England. Well, we didn't get the choice of where we went because there was all different people were applying for this opportunity. So I found out 2 days before Christmas that I was being assigned to Japan. And my mother was very upset. She said, "You're not going, are you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going." My dad just didn't say too much about it. It was my mother who was against my going because she felt that I would never return. She was so worried that something was going to happen to me. They said that she went to bed for 3 days. And that's not my mother. She was always up and around and, doing things. She was very rarely ever sick. And also they had to say that they would be willing to be a host to a young person coming from Japan here. In the end, she had the opportunity to host the girl from Japan that came to the United States. And after she had done that, we never heard anything more about my not going to Japan. She was very happy with it because she was able to entertain that girl in my home. And so she just felt that that was very natural, and everything worked out fine. 4-H sent us records that were to learn the Japanese language and from American words. Well, they weren't very successful. And at least I didn't think so, and neither did the young man that went with me. But there was a gentleman who went with me to Japan. He was Lane Holcroft. He was from Iowa, and his family had a big grain farm, I believe. He had just graduated from Iowa State College and wanted to do some traveling. We also had 2 other young people that were going to the Philippine Islands. So the 4 of us traveled to Washington in June 1955. We had a meeting out there as a group. The person in charge discussed all of the problems that we might have and who we were to get in touch with. And we were there for 2 days. We traveled together cross country by train to San Francisco, which was kind of interesting. Never been on a train for that length of time before, but there we got on board a boat. It was a nice ship. A lot of people were traveling on it, and it took us, I think, about 14 days. We arrived over there in June, and we stayed in Japan until the 1st of November. Several weeks of our time, we went and lived with Japanese families who lived in the islands, and we would help them with whatever work they had to do. We went to 5 different prefectures, and actually I had 6 different homes I stayed with. We also went to a lot of 4-H meetings, and we had to give a lot of speeches and talk about the program and talk about our home and our families. And we had interpreters who were there or went with us so they could interpret what our message was. We had to be very careful because sometimes they said they knew how to interpret and they didn't really know how to interpret you word for word. And so what they said you said was not always clear and was not always correct. I worked on a farm in Hokkaido, the most northern island, and out there we picked a lot of corn, vegetables. In that household, I helped the oldest girl make a dress, and that was interesting because it was entirely different from the way we sew here. So after Hokkaido, we went by train and came back onto the main island of Honshu. And when we moved, Lane, who was the boy that went with me, we always were together and moving to the next prefecture. So we had an opportunity to see each other about every 3 weeks, compare our experiences with the families we were with. So it was great to have the opportunity to meet with him again. The next family I had was really wonderful. It was a bigger family, and we did some work in the rice paddies, not a lot, because the rice was already growing, and we did some tobacco. What the Japanese people did was to pick off the leaves off from the plant, and they would bring them to the house. And then in the evening time, they would sit in the house, and they would use rope that had been twisted, untwist it, and put a leaf in there. And so then they would take these rope of leaves and hang them out in front of their house, and they would hang the leaves out there until they dried. Then they would take them down, untwist the rope, and get the leaf out. I enjoyed doing it because I was able to use the tip of my fingers to uncurl that rope and shove the stem of the tobacco leaf in there. And it was very easy for me. They had a hard time understanding how I could do it so fast. Well, I had been working in an office doing a lot of typing, and the ends of my fingers, they had been used to do that, which was almost the same thing as putting that leaf into the rope. After we had been to 3 families, we went back to Tokyo for a while, just kind of rest and relaxation. And they took us to see the Golden Temple, which is south of Tokyo. So we went by train and we walked towards the Golden Temple, and it was so beautiful because it was bright gold and the trees and bushes were very green, and there was water in front of it, and it had the reflection of the temple in the water. And you could see some of the fish in the water that are bright orange. It was just a beautiful scene, and we were very happy to see it. Inside the temple was very plain. There wasn't anything going on that day there, but the outside was just gorgeous, gorgeous. And we also got invited to some homes where we'd have a typical Japanese meal. somebody who was probably worked for the government and they wanted to see an American. So we were able to do a few of those things on our break. And then we left to go to our next family. The next family was south of Tokyo, up in the mountains. We climbed a mountain together one day, and I don't know how big the mountain was, but it was very hard to walk up that mountain. It took me a long time. I finally made it. And there was this man who lived on the top of this mountain. But what he did was collect birds, and that's what he ate. He would get a bird, he'd take the feathers off from it, and then he would roast a bird over fire. And that's what he had to eat all the time. And we tasted it. It was good, but we just tasted it. But the people that we lived with were tremendous. They really took very good care of us, and they made sure that we were participating in their life. They wanted the United States to understand that they were willing. And whenever we traveled any place, they always went with us. So we were never left alone. We did a lot of interviews. We were in newspapers all the time. We were in magazines. And they came because they wanted to see what we did. In some of the areas I went, they never saw an American girl. And they would stand and watch everything we did. They wouldn't interrupt us, but they would watch and they would take pictures of us. Talking about people seeing you, the children in the neighborhood would all want to come and see us. And they would cover up their face like this so you didn't see them, but they were laughing. They thought some of it was very funny. So sometimes at night we'd go out and do some of the dancing that they do. And people just was like, oh, she's dancing. So yeah, they enjoyed that. They enjoyed seeing us participating in their activities and how they do these activities. They were interested to see me sitting on the floor with my legs crossed, eating my meal, because that's the way they do it. They love dressing us up. They used the old kimonos that have been in their families for years and years, and that's what they put on you. They thought that was the best thing there ever was. So like a Sunday or something, that's what we did. They're a lot to put on. You're also a little bit restricted in them. They're long. Then you had these ties that went around the waist, and no buttons on them at all. They were the ties. And then the padding in the back. In this one family, the son in the family dressed up too. And he put on what a man would wear to a wedding. I think I must have had like 6 layers on that day that I had been dressed up to get married. Because I really wasn't getting married. And you couldn't smile when your picture was taken. You were supposed to be very sober. But it was interesting. It was fun. They took very good care of their kimonos. They didn't wash them every day. They used the farming outfits for their daily working. The summer kimono, called a yukata, was just made of cotton, and it had a simple tie around the waist. A lot of time, they'd put those on in the evening time when they were relaxing. And I wore that one quite a lot while I was there. We were surprised at the amount of gifts that they wanted us to share with them. We were given some of the artwork, which they rolled up. It was heavy paper. They were very fragile. We also had the dolls dressed up in Japanese clothing, sandals, kimonos. That was the biggest thing. They were so happy if they could give us a kimono to take home. And they really wanted us to enjoy their things, their styles. And Sometimes it was hard because we knew we couldn't take a large amount of stuff at home. But in the end, we had to purchase a trunk to put everything in. The trunk was full because the families wanted us to go home sharing something from that family. We arrived back in the United States the 1st of November and went across country by train to come all the way to Washington. We went back to Washington to see some of our representatives in Congress to give reports, talking about how we did, what they could do to improve the program, just trying to help the 4-H program per se. So we were there for 3 days, and we then could leave to go home. And I had a special, my husband, though he wasn't my husband at the time, came down to Washington with my girlfriend and picked me up, and he drove us back to Massachusetts, which was nice. I was very happy to come over Mount Tom and see home again. It's been a long time. That first 6 months home, I spent a long time going out and traveling to give a lot of speeches, because the idea of it was to introduce these people from Japan to the people in the United States. And it was like when we were in Japan, we introduced the United States and how we lived. And you went to all sorts of clubs, 4-H clubs, granges, any kind of a club or organization that had speakers were after you. I mean, I was booked. Since I got home, I've given more than 300 presentations to different groups. Of course, it's been quite a few years since I went. I think the last presentation I gave may have been about 20 years ago. My boyfriend, he would take me to my speeches, which was great because he helped carry the projector, and he enjoyed what I had to say, and many times he said, "Oh, you never told me that before," because I would change each of my topics when I went to different groups to speak. We were married a year after I went to Japan, and I had brought home some Japanese silk, made my wedding dress out of that, and had the wedding, and I think there was 10 people who came to the wedding who were all friends of mine. One of the boys of one of the families I stayed with, he came to the wedding, which was very nice. My going to Japan changed my outlook on life. I think I appreciated a lot more things that my parents did for me. I appreciated being able to see other people and how they live, which was very different. It made me realize that, we didn't have much money on the farm, but we had a good life, a real good life. And that's what matters. You don't have to be rich to have a good life. You can just, everyday things, enjoy people. And it's too bad that they have not been able to keep this program going, because it really enriches a person's life. One time when I was in Japan, it was night. It was a beautiful, beautiful night. And the stars were out bright, and the moon was out bright. And that was my closest to my family. I said, that moon and those stars are going to be going over my house. We're not that far away. We're actually very close. And it was just very impressive to me. And I think if more young people had opportunities, or were even willing to do things like that, like traveling, we would be a lot better off as a society.